So what I'm going to do now is paint in my background. And you can see what I'm going to do is just get a basic blue down before I worry about the shadows and stuff. Okay? So for paint, what I've done here, you're going to be using a lot of tints, which is color mixed with white. You're going to use a lot of shades, and you're going to use a lot of tertiary colors, which would be the color mixed with whatever it's next to on the color wheel to get these squashes. Okay? I also have Yellow's Complement, which is purple, on here, because you're going to use that to try and mix some of the shadows of what you see in those yellow squashes. Okay? So those are the basic colors you guys need to all start with. Okay? Depending on what else is in your book, you might need, or in your picture, you might need other things. I'm going to start with a large round tip brush to do the background. And what you can see here, I'm just going to mix up a little bit of a lighter blue because I want to be able to go darker with the blue without having to add black to it. So if I start a little lighter, I have more room to do that. Okay? And I want to mix up a decent amount here. Okay? First thing I'm going to do is just edge everything. So I'm going to go in here and edge around my pumpkin shape. And now you can use a skinnier brush for this part too. Whatever you feel like you need to do to be more accurate. You can use a larger brush too, you gotta go slowly. So this is like I'm cutting in all the edges. And always check back with your photo so that you don't accidentally cover up something, because you might have a lot of erase lines and it's hard to tell what you're keeping sometimes. Now I'm going to go back then, and what I'm doing is blending that edge, because as I first go around, it kind of gets thick right there. And I don't want that, so I just blend it out into the background so it doesn't build up like a thick spot. Cut around the squash here. And what this does is it really helps you to get a clear idea of what your picture is going to look like, because now I can see what's my foreground and what's my background. And anytime you get a thick spot, I try to go back and just pick it up just by smoothing out with the brush. And like I said, I'm just getting a basic blue on here. I'm not going to be too worried at the moment about the shadows and stuff. I'll kind of do that here in a little bit. Okay, make sure you paint all the way to your tape edge so that you don't have any funny areas that don't look completed. You can paint all the way over the tape, it doesn't matter. It's just there to kind of help hold your paper. So I have like this little corner, and I got a little bit of a dark blue in there, so it looks kind of nice. Okay, so I have that top area filled in. So now what I'm going to do is try and look at this picture and just get the idea of the shadow. So there's a really dark shadow there. And this is where I emphasize that you don't have to have it exactly perfect. You're just suggesting the idea that there's some darker spots in your blue, there's some lighter spots in your blue. And you'll notice that I have a much more vibrant blue color in my painting. And I just chose to do that because I think my orange will pop out nicer on a richer blue color. So that's up to you. If you want it to match perfectly, then you would want to add more white to your blue. But I always go for more brilliance in my paintings than what I see in the photo. Okay, so I have the little shadow of the pumpkin right here. I'm going to just suggest that, but now using the basic blue that comes out of the bottle, so there's no white in it. And then just show kind of where it goes. Okay, now so that's just kind of suggesting that there's a shadow there. There's a little bit of a shadow here. Anytime you add different values in the blue, it's just going to make it more interesting. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is darken that shadow a little bit by mixing some black into my blue and getting a little bit of a tint. And because this is already wet, it's going to just mix right into there. So what I might do is just kind of get a little bit of this on there and then go back and kind of do it later, because once it's wet, it just is going to keep mixing in, and you're not going to necessarily get a much darker color. Always feathering out your brush strokes so that they kind of fade into the other color that you've added it to. Okay, so that would be at least my basic layout. Now I can see my edges of each thing. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is look at each object and just pick a basic color to start with. Okay, so it doesn't have to be all these oranges at once. I'm just going to pick a basic orange. Okay, it doesn't have to be all these yellows. I'm just going to pick a basic yellow and plot out each color according to how my shapes are laid out. So for today, I'm not going to talk about the details. I'm just going to get the basic on there. Okay, so if we start with the pumpkin, it's up to you what shape you want to do. This is also a round tipped brush. It's just slightly smaller than my background one. Okay, what I found here is just this orange color that's on the shelf, and it's a light orange. And you can see it kind of matches up, and you can hold it up to your picture if you are mixing it, or if you take it out to see if you like that color. Okay, and I just picked this light orange because it's going to give me a lot of room to make it darker. Okay, now another thing, because I always want to have the background done, I kind of overlap my edges a little bit, so you can see I'm making my orange actually go over my next shape, which is that green thing, whatever that is. It's kind of an ugly squash. But the reason for that is so that when I get to my green, I don't have to worry about there being gaps. Now right here is where I want to be careful. You can see I'm going to get a nice edge where I have a nice flow, and just in one smooth stroke, or as smooth a stroke as I can get, push that that yellow right up to the blue. Okay? And like I said, this is just my base color. I'm going to change it a lot. But I want to keep going back and smoothing out the brush strokes as I go. And if I look at the texture of the pumpkin, it has these ridges that go vertical, so I can consider that in my painting and keep my brush strokes going vertical. And that'll just help it to give more of that pumpkin shape. So you can see I just get a nice line and I pull it down. And if you still see a little bit of the blue coming through at first, that's okay. It's just the first stage right now. It kind of comes down into here. And often, if I'm not exactly sure where it ends, I kind of just put some more orange down there so that I have more room to work with and I won't have a gap of the canvas showing. And again, I'm just going to try and move those brush strokes down vertically to keep that pumpkin texture going. Okay, I have the stem here, which is very much of a brown color. So take a little bit of my orange and mix it with a little bit of my black, because like I said, I get lazy and I don't want to go back and get more colors. And you can see that gives us kind of, you guys mix that on your color chart, sort of a brown color. All right, so I didn't even have to step away, and it gave me a pretty nice color. And this is also just my base color, and I will add more texture to it. But that's why I almost always have black and white on my palette whenever I start painting, because you can use them for many colors. So I have those little areas where you can kind of see the canvas coming through, so I'm going to focus on just kind of getting those. Your paper will be really heavy by the time you're done if you've used enough layers. And notice I'm really not using my water much, just to basically wash out my brush, because I want to keep the color thick, and that's about it. So there's my base color for that. Okay, and up here where you see the white, that's where my tape starts, so I'm not going to worry about that. Okay, and I have a little bit of a white gap right here. And now I'm going to just sort of pull that color into my orange just to kind of start changing it. Okay, so now I'm going to look around and see what things I have next. Because my bowl is the next biggest background area, I'm going to do that before I do the squashes. So to mix a gray, I'm going to use my white and my black, obviously. Okay, trick is you don't need much black, otherwise you end up with a very dark gray. So I'm going to take just those couple little spots that I started, you can't see that, and mix up my gray. I will need more than one type of gray to successfully show the silver plate, but just like everything else, I'm just getting a base color. It's kind of like painting by number at this point. I'm just saying, oh, that's a gray. Okay, so I'm going to paint it gray. I'm not going to think too hard about if it's the right tint. You can see I'm just trying to make sure I overlap those edges so I don't have a place where the white is showing. So there's my first edge of the plate, and this is where you want to keep making sure you're watching. And if I get gray in a place where there's not gray, it's not a huge deal. This is where I'm looking at the negative shapes. If I look here, I can see there's a little space here where it comes in. So you really need to watch your negative shapes with the little spaces. Right here, I actually have a little farther away in my painting from there, but that's okay. At this point, I just kind of work with it. I've already decided this is what my paint is going to be like, so I'm not going to really adjust things a whole lot other than colors. And just get it right around that fruit as close as you can so that I don't have any gaps. And there's a lot of details in this plate. There's the edging, there's the beading and stuff. But for now, I'm just getting the gray. And you can see how bright and vibrant that orange is against the blue because they are complementary colors. So they pop off of each other very nicely if they are displayed next to each other. Again, cutting right in at the edge of that squash there, so I don't have any empty spaces, and I can see it goes right up to the book. So you can go all the way up to the book and get that all gray. And pay attention to my lines that I've drawn so that I keep the correct colors together. And again, I'm not using much water because I don't want it to have that watered down look at this point. I'm trying to get a buildup of color. So that would probably be good enough for my first plate. I have another plate underneath it. I want to be able to see the division of those two, so what I'm going to do is mix a slightly lighter gray for the plate underneath it, just so I remember that there's two different plates there. So just a tint. Can you guys see that? Nope, I've screwed up. So I'm just making that bottom plate right here a little bit lighter. So that I remember there's two different plates. And cut up right to that edge so there's no white gaps. In watercolor, you want to try and keep the white there because it helps give you a feeling of white. But in the acrylic painting, it just makes it feel unfinished. Okay, so now you can clearly see I have two different grays there. Okay, next thing I'm going to do quickly is just mixed up kind of a cream of corn yellow color there, a little more white for this one, some sort of a green, probably a light green. I often like to pick the lightest color because then I know I'm going to add in the darker colors and then the light will show through. So I'm just going to mix up a couple of colors here. I'm going to have my round tip. So I'm going to try and scoop up some of this white that doesn't have any of the blue on it, just to get a really sort of light color. And if you need to get more white, now let's see if I got a little bit of blue in it. I mean, if you get a little bit of blue in it, you don't want to use it because even that slight little bit of blue is going to give you a greenish tint. So. White. I always, when I go to the store, I always almost have to get white. White is just the color you use all the time, so I run out of it all the time. So I'm always buying white. So just mixing up sort of a nice color.